Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Career Conversations podcast. We're joined today by Dr. Damion Shelton, one of the Beckman Scholars from 1999, our first class of Beckman Scholars back when the program was beginning. And we're really excited to get a chance to chat with you and check in and hear about where you've gone since getting that award from the foundation. So I'd really like to start, kind of back in the beginning. What brought you into science? You were at the University of Pittsburgh, right? When you got the award, were you excited about science in high school, getting into college? Sort of what was that
Yeah,
like?
so there's a program that I was in. I think other states have them but PA is part of the governor school system. So in high school, I had applied but did not get into the science governor school and ended up going to the agricultural science governor school. So I'd had a lot of interest in computer science. I've done robotics as sort of a hobbyist ever since I was really little. Was actually in a robotics competition, I think, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade back in the 80s. So as a result of being exposed actually to a governor's school that I hadn't planned on going to, which was the ag science, I ended up really getting interested in biology. I think for those of your listeners who maybe don't understand what modern ag is, it doesn't look anything like, I guess, what my notions about it were in the mid 90s. It was highly technical then, has even gotten more technical now. So that kind of got me interested in the bio side of things. So I ended up at Pitt starting in 1996 for bioengineering, and then ended up adding a history and philosophy of science degree as a second major, because the Pitt Honors College was really sort of encouraging liberal arts combined with engineering at the time. And so that's kind of how I ended up ultimately getting exposed to the bio-E side of the world. I had a TA, Ted, in the freshman programming class, who ended up introducing me to his advisor, Ken Fisher, who ended up being my advisor on the Beckman project. And he worked in a lab called the Musculoskeletal Research Center as part of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center complex, doing forearm and upper extremity biomechanics research. And that's one thing led to another. I went through a couple of summer student iterations and ended up writing the Beckman proposal out of the work that I was doing with Dr. Fisher's lab at the time.
Mm-hmm. So you were really in the computers when computers were really new. If you were
Yeah,
doing
I was around.
robotics in the 80s and
Yeah,
computer programming in the 90s, that's yeah.
yeah. That I think maybe a little bit of an unusual person at the time. So I mean, I think what people associate computers with now is not what computers were in the mid 90s. And I had been doing programming back with as far as for those of you who are over 40, like if you might remember the K-Pro computer line, sort of like the green screen computer that you would
Yeah,
see
we turned it
in
on and it was just a
yeah,
cursor and yeah, that was
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so my first robot, I think 88, 89, I'd have to go back and figure it out retrospectively, was with an Apple II, yeah. But yeah, so I was around for the beginning of the internet. The first time I ever used the internet was actually at governor's school. That was sort of like the proto World Wide Web, summer of 1995. And yeah, so I've been around for most of that. It's really interesting now, with agility, having computers in our robots that are, thousands of times more powerful than anything I used growing up. Is a really interesting time to kind of see the evolution of robotics and compute
Mhm.
stuff. But the work that I was doing for the Beckman project was image analysis. So being able to look at computer images of forearms using CT or MRI. And that was kind of new at the time. And that ended up actually being what I got interested in. And I worked on some stuff for the National Library of Medicine and NIH as part of a big project called the Insight Toolkit, ITK, that started, I think, in 1999 and then kept going through 2003, 2004. And that was kind of my bridge from the work that I was doing with Ken's lab over to my grad work at Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah. Was that sort of an in between, like a summer project, or did you spend a couple of years there?
Well, yeah, I mean, so Jonathan, one of the other co-founders of Agility, has a life's work. My wife has life's work. So both of them are kind of interesting compare and contrast with me, which I think is why I get along well with Jonathan, why I get along well with my wife, is that both of them have had sort of a focus for their career over. In the case of Jonathan, he started working on walking robots at CMU starting in 1997. So he's a quarter century into it now. And my wife has been doing English technical writing focused research now for about 20 20 plus years. I tend to bounce between things that I'm interested in. So I had a very unconventional experience in undergrad. So I had the Beckman project, and then by the time that wrapped up in 99, 2000, I took a summer off and actually bicycled cross country to get sort of a mental break between the work that I was doing. When I got back from that, really started working full time on the medical image stuff. Applied to grad school and then got into CMU robotics starting in 2001. For the first couple of years there, was working on the medical image analysis. That project, it's actually still around. So if you go to itk.org, you can see what became of that 2 decades later. But by the time that wound down, I was more interested in sort of medical augmented reality, so heads-up displays for ultrasound, things like that. Ended up doing that for my dissertation work. And then when I left academia after graduating with a PhD in 2007, started a company initially to commercialize that work, but ended up pivoting into 3D scanners. And there was no reason you would have guessed that I would ever start a 3D scanner company, except that I just happened to have the background with the programming stuff and the image processing that ended up being sort of oddly relevant to that.
So, what inspired you when you're leaving grad school to say, I can start a company?
Ignorance and optimism. I think why I was interested in getting a PhD was also why I was interested in leaving. That I really I valued the intellectual time and space to be able to devote 6 years of my life to thoroughly understanding something. And by the time I was done with my dissertation research, really felt that I had taken the time out of my life at a period when I had the flexibility to do it, to really do a deep dive into something intellectually. But what that didn't scratch was the actual getting it out into the world itch, which I've always had a little bit of I don't want to say an entrepreneurial streak, that probably sounds too fancy, but there is a side of me that's very much an engineer and not a scientist, that I value things that have an impact on the world as much as things that are intellectually interesting. And my dissertation work was very much in the intellectually interesting camp, but didn't necessarily have a lot of immediate ramifications from a product standpoint. So I really, that was kind of the next logical step in terms of accumulating interesting experiences, was to go through the exercise of taking something that was largely academic in nature and actually trying to turn it into a product. But certainly earlier in the late 90s or early 2000s, when would have made I think a little bit more retroactive sense to be starting a company, to participate in the early internet boom. At that time I was very science focused. So yeah, like I said, there's no real super compelling point where I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave and start a company. It was just kind of an evolution of having wound down what I was interested in doing from a science perspective and looking to shift it more towards the commercial side of things.
Do you feel like you entered grad school with that sort of mindset goal, that it wasn't going to be a career in academic science, but this is going to serve a mission? And actually, I'd really like to hear, like, did you have mentors that talked to you about that, or how did you kind of hear about that as a path for what you are really interested in doing?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is no. I didn't enter grad school with the idea of starting a company coming out of it. Like I said, I'm perhaps a little bit of an odd duck in that I know a fair number of people who have a specific career goal, and I don't know that I do. I tend to like to learn lots of things. I think that's why I got interested in the history and philosophy of science side. Is it's an interesting topic. It's not that I had something particularly that I wanted to do with it. I don't know what one does with an HBS degree, other than it's actually very valuable from a communications standpoint. But in terms of like jobs that you're qualified to do as a result of that degree specifically, is a little bit less clear than something like, say, finance or computer science or something like that. Where I got interested in the commercialization process, my advisor in grad school, George Stetton, had invented a thing called the sonic flashlight, which is the heads up for ultrasound that I was referring to. And that clearly had a lot of actual real world applications. And George, despite having obviously the intellectual chops to be a tenured faculty at a place like Pitt, also had the interest in getting the thing out into the world. And so we were working with doctors to kind of pilot the device. The thing that I was working on was actually used in a clinic to do some catheter and IV insertions. So it was really cool seeing it in action. I think the commercial interest just sort of evolved naturally out of seeing something used in the real world, which is very different than, say, a completely theoretical approach to grad school, which is not my experience. It was very hands-on, kind of practically building something.
And you sought that out sort of when you were applying to grad school. That was
well, yeah. That's one of the reasons that I think both Pitt and Carnegie Mellon are pretty interesting places. And Pitt specifically in the '90s was really unusual. The time and place, for people who are around now, my wife actually paid her way through University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Pitt wasn't quite as affordable as other university systems in the mid '90s, but it was still relatively inexpensive. And that was a point in time where I would say the public university system in general was transitioning from what people thought about public universities before, which was not necessarily elite institutions, but really starting to say like, hey, no, a public university just has a different mission than a private one. And that actually influenced a lot of the decisions that Pitt made for participation in things like Beckman and trying to encourage undergrad research, having a lot of very focused one-on-one mentorship time with faculty members. So I happened to be in the right place at the right time insofar as that piece of it occurred. To get back to the question of like, did I have a grand plan, where all this would stack together?
No, yeah. No grand plan.
No grand plan.
No grand plan. So what about the sort of imaging to walking robots?
Yeah, that I can sort of do what they call in the film industry a retcon, where I retroactively tell a story that makes sense. But what happened was the company that we started, well, I guess I should say how my first company got started was I interviewed at Google and didn't get a job. So actually, as I was walking out of the interview, I got a cold call on my cell phone from the person who ended up starting the first company with me. It's like, hey, I want to commercialize your grad research. Like, oh, good timing. I interviewed at Google and didn't get a job. So that was how that happened. Was basically I was looking for a job, and one happened to land in my lap at an opportune time. So that company ended up pivoting partway through. We were going to be doing this ultrasound heads-up display, and ended up sort of coincidentally inventing a 3D scanner, and that's where the previous work that I had done on image analysis, really helped from a me writing the code standpoint. That company was acquired in 2012. We happened to be in the right place at the right time with a technology for making a very low-cost 3D scanner for feet, and we're acquired by an orthotics company that, as far as I know, still has the product that they use today for scanning people's feet to make shoe orthotics. And that was really interesting, kind of an interesting mashup of the stuff that I had done with image processing from back in the '90s with the Beckman project, and also the robotics stuff, and also the medical device stuff that I did in grad school. I stayed at the company for about 2.5 years post-acquisition. I would say that ultimately the product worked too well. So, we had done a good enough job on the engineering. There wasn't really a lot left to do. So 2.5 years in, I talked with the new management. I was like, it's great that it's working. We're producing it in high volume. Probably time to part ways and me move on to something else, and for them to actually staff up on the production side, which worked out well. For both of us in terms of freeing up my time and their ability to bring in new folks to work on the project. So at that point, my daughter, who was born fall of 2013, I had been pretty focused with startup stuff for a while. So I decided to take the rest of the summer in 2015 off after I had left Three Rivers, which is the company that I had founded in 2007. Took the rest of that summer off and started working with Jonathan to explore starting the walking robot company. So he and I had known each other, all the way back to 2001 in grad school. And at that point, I had the experience of building a business that had scaled to the point where we could build thousands of something. In this case, 3D scanners, which were a lot simpler than walking robots. But the interesting thing at the time was that there wasn't really any other competing company out that was building walking robots as a commercial product. People are familiar with Boston Dynamics. They have the yellow spot robot, but circa 2015, there wasn't anybody else out there doing it. So a lot of it was kind of, for the first year, kind of almost an academic exercise, and really thinking through the business plan. Is anybody ever going to pay us to build walking robots? how do you go about an investor pitch in something that's totally new. No one had ever raised venture capital, as far as I know, for walking robots. So, I was able to kind of bridge the communications piece. I had enough business experience to not fall flat on my face with talking with investors, and then knew Jonathan's work well enough to be able to communicate it. So that's kind of that start. I had never done any work with walking robots, and in fact, to this date, I've still never done work with walking robots, despite being the CEO of the company. So, I'm here in the context of sort of the broader systems view of the world, placing the robots in context, and certainly we have a well-qualified technical team that does the actual work on the core technology.
Interesting. So is this still satisfying your curiosity and
Well, yeah, I think
jump on that topic? Yeah.
the thing with being a founder CEO in a company doing something incredibly complex, is that there's almost an infinite amount to learn. In fact, that's a conversation that I've had with our board at a bunch of points. Is really at the end of the day, the state that you want to be in as the CEO of a company is to spend your time interacting with the board and the rest of the leadership team with the company. And of course, when you start the company, there is no leadership team, and the board is just the founders. So it's almost a process that I would characterize as trying unsuccessfully for years to make yourself obsolete. Because at the very beginning of the company, I was personally like signing payroll checks, and now of course we have a finance team. We just had a CFO start today, and there's always more to learn. We're up to, and we just had an all hands meeting today, so I happen to have what sounds like a very precise number. We have 162 people working here, and when we started the company October of 16, with our first day, there were a total of 4 of us in the offer, the 3 founders and first employee. So effectively in that 6-year period, we've grown from 4 to 162, and then most alarming to all of us who've been around for a while, almost all that growth has occurred in the last year. It's sort of the process of looking at like an exponential curve. You can double for quite a while, and then suddenly the last doubling gets really big.
Yeah. So are you in production and actually shipping out units? And
yeah, we are. That was part of the original goal from the very beginning, was to ship something as quickly as possible. So we actually shipped our first robots commercially in the summer of 2017. And that was the Cassie robot. If people are on our website, which is agilityrobotics.com. We also have a YouTube channel. You can see the Cassie robot, which has 2 legs but no upper body. And that was sold to academic researchers who wanted to do research and development work on a legged platform. We now have a robot Digit that I think we're up to serial number 53 or 54 on. And we've been building that. We actually launched that product during COVID lockdown, which was a super notable experience in my life. I don't know that I'd rather go through that again, but we've been shipping product all along. We actually we have the next version of Digit coming out a couple years from now, and that will be produced in substantially higher volume. So we're in the process of setting up a factory to build that, and a bunch of other exciting developments in the commercial front.
Yeah, congratulations. I've seen some of the press releases on the raises and the money coming into your company. It's pretty remarkable. So
thanks. Yeah, I mean, the more people we have and the more money that comes in, it's an interesting, there's always more to do, right? Every time you sort of level up what the company can do, you're tackling something that's even more ambitious. So I would not say that the boots on the ground impression from inside is ever that there's enough money, people, or time, because you're always resetting the ambition level every time we do something. But yeah, we're very fortunate to have the support of all of our investors and the team over the years.
Yeah. Well, great. I've been very interested to hear how things have progressed in your random walk through multiple career opportunities. Is there anything that you would kind of give as advice if people starting out,
Yeah, I think it's actually that. So a very slight tangent, but it's not really a tangent. One of the most interesting vacations I ever had, and Jonathan from Agility was actually on it along with another friend of ours from grad school. We actually took a magic 8-ball over to Ireland. and we did a Magic 8-Ball based tour of rural Ireland, where you literally shake the 8-ball up and say, should I go left or right? And you get sort of these ambiguous answers. And ended up.
I'm gonna ask, what is that? But okay, thanks.
Right. So yeah, so like we literally, had the plastic Magic 8-Ball and would shake it up. This was sort of pre-modern internet, right? So we none of us had cell phones with Google Maps because it didn't really exist. And so we were sort of navigating with an atlas and a Magic 8-Ball. But the lesson I learned about that ended up at a pub that was started by one of the explorers on the expedition to Antarctica that ended up, they had to take this small boat, the Shackleton expedition, back across open water and then hike across this crazy island. And one of the guys, Tom Crean, who was from this tiny rural town in Ireland, got back to Ireland post that expedition and started this pub. And I think the lesson that I learned there is you can end up in really interesting places via, what looks like a random walk. And certainly I would never try to talk someone out of having a plan, but just be open to the plan changing and evolving. It's a lot more important, in my opinion, to kind of roll with it, try to be an interesting person that has a lot of interests and hobbies and try different things and realize that at the end of the day, there's no great way to plan a stable arc through the world. And just try to prize adaptability as opposed to thinking that a plan has to be adhered to quickly.
Yeah, that's great advice. Things come that you'll never have seen coming. Be ready.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? I mean,
as well. Yeah.
walking robots didn't exist for all practical purposes when I was entering undergrad, so there would have been no reason to think that I could include that in a career plan. It was that I happened to meet somebody who did have that as an objective, but only because Jonathan's goal was to totally invent this field from scratch, at the time, given the lack of other work that was occurring there. So yeah, I mean, having seen the rise of the internet too, whatever, the Google founders thought they'd be doing with the lives, I'm sure it didn't look like, what they ended up doing. Same thing with, other large internet companies or any of the technology that I think most of us take for granted today. So, just do a lot. I strongly encourage double majors. If you're doing a technical degree of any form, whether it's bio or chem or engineering or anything, getting a double major with the humanities has been hugely, hugely helpful. A lot of what I spend my time doing now is talking to people, things like this podcast, news reporters within the company, technical documentation, all that kind of stuff. So backfilling a technical degree with a non-technical one is, in terms of a concrete suggestion, probably the strongest one I would give.
Great. Hope people take that to heart, because communication is essential. Communicating to non-technical people, I think we've all seen the importance of that in the past couple of years. So, yeah. So appreciate your time. Thank you very much for chatting with us today, and look forward to hearing great things from Digit.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. Stay tuned. We'll continue to drop new videos, and yeah, it's been great to work on it.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks.